Hey, a tough loss to the Steelers, the Zach Ertz pass that didn't happen, and a special guest tonight to help preview the Thursday night game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's have a podcast. Hey there, Commanders fans. Welcome to another episode of Commanders Gridiron. I'm your host, Steve Lockman, where we talk about all things on the field and off the field about our beloved Washington Commanders. And as most of you know, we took a hard, tough defeat at home to the likes of the Pittsburgh Steelers, 28-27, just barely missing out on beating them. Some critical mistakes at the end of the game. We're going to break it down in a little bit and talk about where things went wrong, what we could have did better. We're going to give out some game balls and gassers. We're going to do our game nuggets, and then we have a special guest tonight. It's going to be on later in the show in the second half to help preview the upcoming NFC East rivalry with the Philadelphia Eagles. As always, thank you for tuning in, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, X. Feel free to use that comment box on whatever platform you're using. We love to have some questions, love to have some dialogue, some comments. If it's about your team, about our teams facing each other, it doesn't matter. We're all football fans here tonight. Hopefully you're part of the Commanders crowd, and let's get the show started. As always, we usually try to dig up and find some off-the-field news. And, on our recent little hot streak of victories, there's kind of been, let's be honest, zero off-the-field news, which is kind of good. No distractions, no headlines, nothing like that. But three things kind of popped up over the last week. Most of them have actually been in. 2 out of 3 were actually in the last 48 hours, with one of them occurring on Sunday, which will be our last one. But the first one that we're going to get to, former defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio was arrested in Wisconsin for DUI. Ever since, it seems like since he got fired last November, right after Thanksgiving game from the Commanders under Ron Rivera's staff, things just kind of haven't been going the greatest for him. And on the other night, he was actually arrested, I guess on Friday, early Saturday morning, for operating the vehicle while intoxicated. He was seen hitting a street sign and then broke a nearby fence to a house. Del Rio, who was actually fired the day after the Cowboys Thanksgiving game last year, joined the Wisconsin Badgers in August as an advisor to head coach Luke Fickell. Del Rio is reportedly going to be resigning from that staff as a result of his recent transgression. He did say that, hey, look, it's a tough situation, decisions that all of us have to be able to take full responsibility for. So what I need to do is take that resignation under consideration, and we'll continue to move forward to make things right. As most of you know, Del Rio actually played 11 seasons in the NFL. Before he retired, became a predominantly really good defensive coordinator, better coordinator than he actually was a coach. And he actually produced top 5 defenses for the Commanders, the Broncos, and the Carolina Panthers. The next little tidbit that actually came out yesterday is kind of super interesting because the current player put the tweet out on X, and hey, let's just see what the tweet was actually all about, shall we? So Brian Robinson, who's actually been hampered lately with a hamstring injury, hasn't played the last 2 weeks. Thought was he might be coming back for Pittsburgh. Didn't make Pittsburgh, wasn't 100%. He was limited in practice the last 2 days, so there is speculation that he's going to be ready to go on Thursday night against the Eagles, but even that remains to be seen. But anyhow, it was kind of interesting because out of the blue, B-Rob put this post up on Twitter, got shared across all the media platforms. I picked it up on Facebook, and you can see there, B-Rob basically says, hey, look, being injured is one thing, but to hear backlash from MFers that sit on the couch every Sunday blowing me. Don't nobody say shit when the parlays hit, though. Y'all have no humility on this app for real. I wonder why some players don't respect the fans. Consequently, that tweet for him lasted probably, I think, like 4 to 5 hours, and then it got taken down. And in all honesty, there was a lot of divide between the Washington fan base about this post from star running back number 1, Brian Robinson, and whether he had the right to say that, his attitude towards fans and engaging them on social media. Now, look, let's be completely honest. Is B-Rob wrong in his post? Probably 100% not, right? The dude's right. And, unfortunately, these guys get paid millions of dollars to play the game, but on the flip side, they're also human too. What they do on the field or how they play on the game or the fact that they're injured and can't play in the game is basically nobody in the public or a fan's business to help you make your weekly betting streaks, your parlays, your fantasy football, etc. So to go onto social media and personally attack NFL players and even professional athletes for that matter, because it's happened in the NBA, it's happened in the MLB, basically any sport, you name it, especially now that, I don't want to say professional gambling, but, legalized sports gambling is done in like all but 12 states across, the country. It's just going to become more prevalent. So look, I can't fault B-Rob for doing what he did or how he said it. Probably a lot of players want to say this and take that rebuttal to the fans. Was it necessarily the best engagement that he could have did? Probably not, which is probably why I got taken down. Somebody in his PR group probably said, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, and let's just move on, and it is what it is, right? Last but not least, I want to say, because he covered so many games, he hit his 500th milestone covering the Redskins, the Washington football team, as well as now the Washington Commanders. John Keim, who's basically had a career for ESPN as one of the ESPN insiders, team reporters, pool group, worked for the team individually, blah, 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 you name it, has actually been recognized and actually was recognized at the stadium on Sunday for covering his 500th game for Washington. 500 might not seem like a lot, but when you figure that a team on average plays, well, back then it was 16 games a season, now 17, 18 weeks with the bye, and throw in only a handful of playoffs, because let's be honest, in the last 20 years, we haven't made the playoffs that much. This is actually quite an accomplishment for John Keim. John Keim is actually one of the trusted insider sources that I get a lot of my information from, especially from a team aspect based out of Ashburn. So, and we reference him a lot. I would love to have him on this show sometime. Don't know if that would ever happen, but congrats to him as he reaches that 500th milestone. All right. So, as I alluded to at the top of the show, getting into the on the field side of things, we know that we took on the Pittsburgh Steelers this past week. Battle of the big league games, basically a team at the top of the AFC North, team at the top of the NFC East. And unfortunately, we came out on the short side of the stick, 27-28. It was an exciting game in Landover, and it wasn't the best field conditions, wasn't necessarily the best weather, wasn't raining, but it was a good kind of Sunday afternoon for some football. And let's kind of break down the game and see where we kind of went wrong, right? Jaden Daniels kind of did what he did. He went 17 for 34 for 202 yards and no passing touchdowns. All of our touchdowns on Sunday were actually on the ground, but when it did count and when it did matter, we had some big throws through the air, but then we also had some not big throws in the air too, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. Russell Wilson started for the Pittsburgh Steelers, went 14 for 28, 195, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception, which was actually intercepted by Jeremy Chin, who's been a stellar pickup from Carolina, work on his 1-year deal. Austin Eckler led the rushing attack, 13 carries, 44 yards, and 2 ground touchdowns since B-Rob was out for the game. And Terry McLaurin led the receiving corps with 5 receptions for 113 yards. There's a lot of betting and amping up that he might get his first 150-yard game in a long time. Fell short of that by a little bit, but, hey, still a great performance nonetheless. Pittsburgh started things off by scoring a touchdown to George Pickens to make it 7-0. Washington turned around towards the end of the first quarter with the first Austin Eckler touchdown run to make it 7-7. Then in the second quarter, about halfway through, a little more than halfway through, there was a touchdown pass to Pat Freiermuth, which actually was set up by the St. Juice PI to get him down near the goal line. There was what a lot of people thought to be a delay of game on that touchdown pass that was never called. If you watch the all 22 replays or even the TV production replays, you see the game clock go to 0 for a good 1 to 2 seconds before the snap was ever made. So in all essence, hey, look, Pittsburgh got a free one on that one, but it kind of is what it is, right? I actually thought they had somebody that watched the play clock specifically, but whatever. It didn't happen. Washington turned around and had substitute kicker Zane Gonzalez, who was filling in for Austin Seibert because of injury, kick a 48-yard field goal, make it 14-10. And then Washington scored again with 16 seconds left to give them some momentum going into halftime by an Austin Eckler 1-yard touchdown run to make it 17-14. Washington ended up getting the ball coming out of the second half, puts together a decent little drive. Jeremy McNichols has the touchdown to make it 24-14. And then Pittsburgh turns around a couple drives later and answers with a Najee Harris 1-yard touchdown run, make it 24-21 Washington. Zane Gonzalez adds his second field goal of the afternoon to make it 27-21. And then the only scoring in the fourth quarter was that basically last touchdown pass up in the air, rainbow to Mike Williams, 32-yarder that St. Juice got burned on. And basically they scored on that pass play to make it 28-27. Then there was the Zach Ertz play that kept the next drive from going any further with less than 2 minutes. We're going to get into that. And we actually have some video footage that we can play as we break that down as well. So, it kind of is what it is. Washington didn't do too bad. Jaden Daniels, we knew he was going to go up against a hard defense in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has one of the best defenses in the league. Even though he took 4 or 5 sacks in the game, Daniels didn't have any fumbles. Daniels didn't have any interceptions. TJ Watt didn't have any sacks, but, his counterparts on the defensive line as well as some of the linebackers kind of made up for it. But overall, it was kind of a good to decent game. We had our opportunities to win. We had our opportunities to cash in on some bigger plays. Wide receivers were dropping balls like it was slippery butter and the whole 9 yards. So what did we get out of the day with Pittsburgh? This is what we got. Basically, Dante Fowler Jr. had another 2 sacks on Sunday and nearly had a third. Russell Wilson is basically another, for as old as he is, I want to say like mid-30s, early 30s. He's still a really good mobile quarterback, kind of not quite the likes of Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, but is still not 100% pocket passer, so that, when he needs to extend a play or his reads aren't there, like, he can make things happen with his feet. And, he definitely did that on a couple of plays to us on Sunday. Sheldon Day, who came in as part of the linebacker rotation, had a really good day. And actually, between like an edge presence / rotation on the line, he actually did really good, right? In front of Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu at linebacker. He played basically kind of like filled in as like the edge and defensive tackle. Since Jonathan Allen's out for the season on injury, Payne is getting some work. Farrell was in there as well. But they had a really good day. No pun intended. And it seemed like he was on almost every tackle in the running game, especially, which was huge for them because they were able to limit, for the most part, Najee Harris to less than what he's normally used to, being one of the better rushing attacks in the NFL. Jeremy Chin, dude, was awesome. He was in on a lot of plays. He's going to be one of our game ball guys here in a little bit in our segment coming up. We'll talk about him in a couple minutes. Trent Scott filling in at backup tackle because of injury. Went up against one of the best defensive players in the game. And up until late in the fourth quarter, Watt didn't do a thing, basically, really, right? I think that's kind of the game plan, was to double team, chip, whatever you want to do scheme-wise against J.J. Watt and make the rest of the defense kind of bring that pressure, which they did a lot of times, and in some cases were successful. But all in all, the goal was to try and limit TJ Watt from being the destructive defensive player that he is. And overall, you got to say that happened. Austin Eckler, the dude's just a dog. Let's be honest. He was brought in to be the change of pace back to B-Rob, who was more of that just bruising north-south runner. And he's done way more than we could have expected so far this season. Terry McLaurin had some amazing catches and one long run to start the second half on that drive. I think it was like a 45-yard pass, 45-yard pass coming out of the gates in the second half. Made his day look easy. He did have a couple drops, one kind of more predominant than the others, but nothing to the extent of what, Noah Brown, Zach Ertz, Luke McCaffrey, Diami Brown, the whole 9 yards, like all those guys collectively had. Those guys needed some serious stick them on their hands and to figure out that the ball goes in the hands and not off the hands and on the grass. But Terry McLaurin had a really good day. So, as I said that, Jaden Daniels ended up being 17 for 34 for 202 yards. No passing touchdowns, kind of odd for him for the day, but, he basically kind of took what the Pittsburgh defense was going to give him, right? But the big thing was, against that defense and that pressure and those linebackers who basically they put Patrick Queen as a spy on Jaden Daniels all day. It worked out fairly well for them. He wasn't able to extend a lot of plays, wasn't able to run out of the pocket. Cliff Kingsbury wasn't able to give a lot of designed runs to Jaden Daniels for the game. So it basically kind of was an effective defensive scheme, right? So you kind of see on the graphic on your screen kind of where the passes went. Obviously, there's no blues for the touchdowns. A lot of short, mostly 15 yards and under for his 17 completions. But, 4 to 5 of those ended up being longer pass plays because of the runs after the catch. 2 of them specifically to Terry McLaurin, 1 to Zach Ertz, 1 to Noah Brown. 1 actually was incomplete, but the one to the far top right of your screen up by the 25-yard line was actually the one that Noah Brown went deep on and got the 37-yard pass interference call against Pittsburgh secondary. So even though there were, he's basically only 50% of his passing, one of his lower completion percentage rates so far this NFL season, there were a lot of productive plays even on incomplete passes. Fortunately, no interceptions, as I said, which is huge for a game like this, that of this magnitude when you're vying for the, kind of be the cream of the crop for the NFL, going up against the AFC team to keep your record where it is. This is actually kind of interesting that I found online digging through. It's the first time I've ever seen something like this. I know it's been out there, but it kind of just gives more perspective to the stuff that we talk about here on the show and how we break down our numbers, who's doing what and stuff like that. So the first slide is going to be the offensive side. The next one's going to be the defensive side. It's going to be cut off at the top. So kind of keep in mind what you see in the 4 columns, right? You see basically their position. Okay, kind of everybody knows that with the stars of the Commanders, right? The next column is basically the number of offensive plays. So the Commanders offense ran 64 offensive plays. As you can see, 5 guys did 100% of the offensive plays. Rookie tackle Brandon Coleman did 100%. Nick Allegretti did 100%. Sam Cosmi did 100%. Trent Scott did 100%. Why is that significant? That's 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen, right? Biadasz started the game, but then ended up going out with injury. I think about halfway through the second quarter, beginning of the second quarter, fairly early on. So they kind of swapped him in and out. And Dieter came in for Biadasz and did fairly decent, especially against that Steelers defensive front, right? And of course, JD had 100% of the offensive plays as well. But you can kind of see the breakdown of where it goes from there, right? A couple wide receivers up there, at 89, 90%. Running back, tight end, another wide receiver up in the 70s. And then it drops off significantly. So the rest of the game is kind of, based off of Cliff Kingsbury's offensive packages going in when they went heavy and got an extra tight end, whether it was John Bates or Ben Sinnott, to beef up for runs, or to make it look like a run and send one of them out, as a route runner, etc. The mix of the 3 running backs between Eckler, McNichols, and Rodriguez, so you kind of see that. And then some of the guys to kind of help justify, solidify, whatever you want to say, their existence on the team. They do special teams as well, and that's the last 2 columns. Then on the flip side, we kind of look at the defensive side of things, right? And, even though it's kind of cut off, you can still see the numbers. So you kind of see that, hey, look, there's still, 5 to 6 guys that are doing 100% of the work on the defensive side of things. And, so actually there's 3, Jeremy Chin, Bobby Wagner, and Frankie Louvu, the big workhorses of the defense. We know that, look, the defensive front isn't going to be 100%, but they're probably going to be pretty close just because they kind of rotate in and out to stay fresh. They kind of do that by committee. So you see, Payne and Armstrong and Newton, who we're going to talk about, had the big rookie mistake at the end of the game, and Mathis and Farrell and Holmes. So, between 6 guys, they're rotating between 3 to 4 positions to kind of do what they do. But you see the defensive output by the guys on the team. And then, as of course, typically a lot of times between running backs, wide receivers, and some of the backup tight ends, as well as a lot of guys on defense, you'll see there's that group collectively playing special teams for the Commanders. As most of us know, coming out of the game, we talked about it earlier, that, Pittsburgh has that stellar defense. I think they're in actually the top 5, maybe top 7 in defense going into this game. And, according to True Media, Pittsburgh sent 5 or more rushers on 19 snaps in the game. It was a season high for them. Their previous season high for that amount of people on rushes was 11 against the New York Giants last week. So, and it's actually interesting because then that made Jaden Daniels was actually 7 for 16 in their situations with 3 sacks. So when you have 19 opportunities, they're sending a ton of pressure, whether that's blitz combinations, stunts, or just straight up, rushing. And Jaden Daniels was able to go 7 for 16, and 3 of them being sacks. It's actually a pretty good number that reflects well on our offensive line and, keeps those guys in check. So what can we take away from this game against the Pittsburgh Steelers? Yes, we lost 28-27, but there are a couple of things we can take away. Jaden Daniels wasn't sharp, but he wasn't bad either. He's definitely growing each game. There were some inaccuracies. We don't know if that was residual from the rib injury that he sustained 2 weeks ago. There probably was a little more uncomfortable. Took a good shot in the end zone in the first half to the rib cage from TJ Watt underneath his own goalpost, which kind of made me cringe a lot. But overall, he didn't have a bad game. The defense and their scheme for Pittsburgh definitely limited JD to his running and extending plays, or once he was going through his route reads, then being, hey, look, I can run for a first down, or et cetera. So a lot of times it made him throw the ball away. It made him throw it out of bounds to avoid the sack. Yes, he did take a couple sacks. I think it was 5 or 6 for the day, maybe 4 or 5. But overall, he didn't do bad. He did have some high balls. He did have some timing balls that were off, behind the receiver, ahead of the receiver. Nothing really short, which is kind of good. But, it didn't help that the wide receivers were dropping balls as well. You could definitely tell that the offense missed B-Rob this past week, as well as the week against the New York Giants. But we were able to get some decent, actually really good output from Austin Eckler and Jeremy McNichols as well. I kind of expected them to use Chris Rodriguez a little bit more after last week's game and the production that he gave, but for whatever reason, he just wasn't part of the mix in Cliff Kingsbury's scheme this week. And, maybe he'll end up getting used a little bit more on Thursday night against the Eagles, especially if B-Rob is unable to go, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Officiating did not cost the Washington game. So this is kind of something that is kind of twofold. It kind of did and it didn't. So, hey, look, the officials didn't call the delay of game on what ended up being a Pat Freiermuth touchdown in the end zone to negate that touchdown. And, we're going to go over it and talk about the mistake that, Ertz made, so to speak, on being short of the line of gain at the end of the game in the 2-minute drill that would have helped move the ball down the field and give us that chance at a field goal to win the game. But we had more than enough opportunities, if you take the referees out of the game, to put ourselves into position to score more points, keep the Steelers from scoring points. Look, if Ben St. Juste doesn't become toast and at least somewhat guards Mike Williams, he never catches that ball in the end zone. If we play some defense and get a better matchup on the tight end Freiermuth, who basically, when a lot of times, I think it was like 80% of the time, when he ran out and ran a running route, whether it was into the flat or, a stop and go or whatever, Chin, the free safety, was on him, which was kind of a mismatch for us. And Russell Wilson exploited that when he saw it. So we don't have the muff punts, one of which resulted in a Pittsburgh touchdown. You can basically make a list, going on and on and on, that, these guys would absolutely, you could basically say our own mistakes killed us rather than the 2 or 3 calls or missed calls, bad calls from the officials, right? All right. As Michael Rice jumping in says, hey, better decisions from the receivers would have definitely helped give the Commanders a chance to win. Absolutely. Look, whether it's the routes they're running and how they're running it, whether it's the fact that, going back to his verbiage there, it says better decisions, right? Diami Brown was running a drag route across the back of the end zone. The ball hits him literally in the hands in front of his helmet. And one of the things that I immediately looked at, especially when I looked at the replay, was he was wide open. So first he dropped what could have been a great touchdown. Second of all, he jumped. It might have only been like 6 to 12 inches, but he jumped. And it's like, why did you even jump? Like, you could have just kept running, catch the ball, and boom, touchdown. 6 points, kick the extra point, get your 7, get off the field, right? Luke McCaffrey was wide open. I don't know if it was the presence of the timing of the pass going to him, the timing of the Pittsburgh defender coming over to hit him right after, like, not quite a bang-bang play, but almost a bang-bang play, as he would have caught the ball and then went out of bounds, but hit him in the hands, dropped it. Zach Ertz had a wide open ball that he should have caught and dropped it. Noah Brown the same way, so, and each guy kind of had like 2 critical to important drops. Let's be honest and call it as it is, right? So, it definitely kind of did us in. But the big one that everybody was kind of talking about and, was kind of saying, hey, look, this was kind of the deal breaker for the game, was the Zach Ertz play, the Jaden Daniels pass to Zach Ertz. A couple things on the play. Obviously, the team can't throw the challenge flag under 2 minutes. That review has to come from the booth. It is a reviewable play, but it has to, I say, be initiated by New York in replay or the replay assist through the head referee's headset, earpiece, whatever you want to call it. And it'll cycle through like once or twice here as we play it here in a second. But you'll see where the line of gain is, basically the first down yardage marker. You'll see the play with Zach Ertz. Now, they talked about him, basically catching the ball, not being down by contact, coming back across the line, but the ball's still in the left hand, which, according to all camera angles, showed him at least being at the first down marker. I think one of the biggest questions is, A, it was a really poor spot for the ball. Number 2, why, if it was that close, why didn't they measure it, which they remeasure it for a first down, first down, like they do 95% of the time. So, hey, whatever. Here it is. Let's take a look. You all can be your own judge as to what happened. So basically, you see Zach Ertz catching the ball, throws his knee down. Now, look, it is Zach Ertz's fault.
3rd and 8 for
For
Pittsburgh
being
from
that
their own
short of the
44-yard
first
line.
down, look, most wide receivers and tight ends in the NFL know if you're that close on a 4th down play, you got to go an extra yard or 2 past, maybe even 3, right? Because if you're coming back on a hitch, a hook, a curl, anything to try and get that ball from your quarterback, it's going to bring your momentum back across the first down marker like it did
3rd
with
and
Zach
8
Ertz.
for Pittsburgh from their
And,
own
you know,
44-yard
basically,
line.
if you look, he's basically landing on the first down marker, right? So it is super close. The ball is always in his left hand, which basically hardly ever comes back across what the marker is, that gold line across the field. And, you know, basically it was a really poor spot, at least one that should have gotten remeasured. Now, I get it. It's
3rd
4th
and 8
down,
for Pittsburgh
you know,
from their own
but, you know,
44-yard
hey,
line.
look, measure it and see where it is. And, you know, if the measurement says, you know, the team's inches short, okay, then we can kind of live with that, right? Especially since it got reviewed. But one of the things you got to ask, you know, and I know they have been kind of demoing it, and I don't know what it's called now, the USFL. It used to be something else, you know, basically the minor league of football, right? That comes in the spring. They are actually, I guess, trialing, if you want to call it that, since I guess that's what they call it, some kind of microchip in the football for GPS location, right? But like, you got to think that, like, look, it's 2024. How can we not figure out where the ball is on the field of play in an NFL game in today's league, right? Whether it's a pile of 10 guys, whether it's a play like this, you should be able to look at the football and be like, think, hey, it landed right here, you know, put a spot on a map, you know, whatever you want to call it. But it kind of is what it is. And, you know, it basically was our drive killer offensively in under 2 minutes. Now, what really kind of did us in was, you know, hey, look, we were able to hold Pittsburgh. Well, basically, we ended up giving the ball up right there. We basically had our timeouts left. We had time on the clock to work with. And, you know, look, we knew that if we played some smart defense, they were going to try and run the ball, run the clock out. But we had timeouts to kind of counter that we had the opportunity to at least get the ball back, make a couple plays, kick a field goal, right? Comes down to the last play of the game. We kind of knew going out that Pittsburgh was going to try and jump you off sides because it was 4th down. They weren't going to punt the ball back to us with like 30 seconds left, 20 seconds left, whatever it was, under a minute, under a half minute. And lo and behold, you know, Russell Wilson was able to get the rookie to jump off sides and basically seal the game for him to give him the victory of 28-27. So, you know, it's definitely a heartbreaker, definitely a learning experience for the Rook. And, you know, it's definitely a hard one. But, you know, going up against one of the best teams in the AFC and arguably one of the best teams in football, I'll definitely take it. Yes, it drops us back down to 7-3. But, you know, hey, look, at this point, I'll gladly take anything, right? After the game, you know, everybody wants to crowd around Johnny Newton's locker, the rookie who jumped off sides, and basically says, you know, hey, look, the sentiment throughout the locker room was the same. The brotherhood is real. For about a month, Washington players have stressed that the team has that special brotherhood. And this was the first time it showed up in a difficult moment. No one looked defeated after the loss, as many have in previous years, which is kind of like the culture of the Ron Rivera era and previously. Nobody was pointing fingers. Nobody was placing blame. But when reporters approached rookie defensive tackle Johnny Newton, whose neutral zone infraction actually sealed the loss for Washington, safety Quan Martin intervened and said, hey, look, can he get media today? He kind of said jokingly, look, he knows he screwed up. And a lot of guys for our team, even though they knew that, they were definitely consoling in him. You know, you saw it going down the tunnel to the locker room, you know, guys, you know, coming up to him, putting their arm on his shoulders, you know, kind of giving him some encouragement. Hey, look, it happened. It is what it is. Yes, it cost us the game, but, you know, we're still in a really good spot, right? And that was even noticed that, you know, hey, look, even quarterback Jaden Daniels came down when they were walking through the tunnel. And actually even later on during media availability, Daniels walked over to Newton at his locker, and kind of had some words with him about it. Even though he was frustrated, you could tell that they were still united in the locker room, which is huge, right? Look, as we said throughout the night, the Steelers are by far the best defense the Commanders have faced this year, probably even better than when they faced the Ravens. And they held them in check to 5 3-and-outs, 9 Washington drives, or I should say 9 of Washington's 11 drives went for sub 25 yards. We kind of knew that going in against the Steelers. It was a shame that, our new pickup at the trade deadline, Marshawn Lattimore, couldn't join our squad. It's going to be interesting to see if he plays Thursday night. So far, he hasn't practiced. In all honesty, as much as I really want him and we need him on Thursday, I would not be surprised if they hold him out again on Thursday, since it is a short week, and basically just give him another 10-day rest cycle, and then he's ready to go against Dallas. I could honestly see that being, the plan for Lattimore, even though the team desperately needs him on Thursday night. Real quick, before we jump into our Game Balls and Gassers segment, the Game Balls and Gassers segment is brought to you by Jason Fine, a.k.a. Attorney Big Al. You can reach him at 1-800-HURT-123, specializing in motor vehicle accidents, slips and falls, workers' compensation, personal injury claims, has 3 convenient office locations throughout Pennsylvania and New Jersey, with 1 in Philadelphia, 1 in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, 1 in Pittsburgh, PA. Give Jason a call. Tell him you saw him here out of the Box Sports. Give him a call for that legal advice, legal representation. Remember, if you don't win, he doesn't collect. That's Jason Fine, a.k.a. Attorney Big Al, at 1-800-HURT-123. All right. As we go into our second half of the show tonight, we give out a couple game balls. First game ball's got to go to that dude, Jeremy Chin, who basically was the free agent pickup from North Carolina, the Carolina Panthers, in the offseason. Had 12 tackles, that interception that you see pictured there on your screen, and 1 fumble recovery down on, I think it was like the 1-yard line, 2-yard line, literally right as the running back from Pittsburgh was going to the ground, which ultimately was great for us, saved the Pittsburgh touchdown. But, hey, look, when you're deep in your own end zone, even your own territory, up against your own end zone in the second half against a defense like Pittsburgh, you're probably not going to be able to get out too far. And that's kind of the result. I think we got out to like the 8 or 9 yard line, and then we ended up punting it. But it was a huge swing in momentum and a touchdown saver for sure. So Jeremy Chin gets the first game ball of the week. Next game ball goes to Dante Fowler. This dude, even though he's a pickup, I don't want to say leftover, but transplant from Dallas, coming over with Dan Quinn. This dude's been on fire so far this season. He's up to 16. He had 16 tackles this season, 8.5 sacks. His season total in his career was 10.5, and he's already at 8.5 so far this season. He had an interception so far this season, a pick 6, and 10 tackles for losses. That dude's a beast, and he had 2.5 more sacks this game, something like 6 more tackles, and, basically a force to be reckoned with on the outside. You got to give it to him, right? We also got to give a game ball to Terry McLaurin. Isn't quite getting into the end zone on the big catches. Got it down to like the 2-yard line one time. Had another one for 35 yards. Big play. Had another toe tapper on the sidelines to keep a drive going. Look, he might not be the fastest dude on the field. He might not be elite, but he's in the top 5 in receiving yards so far in the NFL this season. Up there, in catches. Up there in receiving touchdowns as well. So he's definitely solidifying himself as one of the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. And we'd love to see it. Gassers on the other side. Look, I think this is like the 4th week in a row that he's going to start off. But Ben St. Juice, he can't wait fast enough for Marshawn Lattimore to come and play in the secondary, because he's getting matched up against number 1 wide receivers every week, and he's basically just being toast. If he's not getting toasted, he's giving up pass interference calls to the tune of like 20, 30, 40 yards a piece, right? So obviously he had to play or not play. Let's be honest. He didn't have to play against Mike Williams for the game-winning touchdown for the Steelers. Gave up a bigger PI early in the first half that set up the Freiermuth touchdown. He's just struggling a lot right now. I get it. He's probably one of the better ones that we got back there, which is why he is where he is. But, you kind of think that once Lattimore comes in, gets comfortable, gets fully healed up, St. Juice is going to end up going to number 2 wide receivers against opposing teams, which is also going to bring Sanders still back into his natural position. Chin's going to be able to do what he can do, and I think it's going to greatly solidify our secondary. The problem is we don't know when that's going to happen. Everybody other than Terry McLaurin basically gets a gasser because they can't figure out how to catch the ball this past Sunday. Look, I love our wide receiving core. 9 times out of 10, they do great work. But this past Sunday, for whatever reason, they just didn't want to catch the ball. And it absolutely killed us on so many drives, so many opportunities, and especially in the red zone when we had the opportunity to score 2 or 3 different touchdowns. But, hey, sure. It kind of is what it is, right? We kind of knew that, look, expectations are what they are. A lot of people and fans were, knowing that, hey, last season we finished 4-13, ended up picking number 2 overall in the draft to get JD. Look, there's a reason why we picked number 2, right? And why you pick so bad, or why you're so bad to pick that high in the draft. That a lot of expectations this season were basically to go 800. Going into this game, we were 7-2 already, way more than what we were last season. So we've been doing leaps and bounds, right? But you can kind of also see where other teams are so far this season compared to what they were last season, right? So the LA Chargers, look, they're doing really well with new coach Jim Harbaugh. They're sitting at 5-3. They finished 5-12 last year. I think they picked number 5 or 6 in the NFL draft. I think it was 6, 7. I think it was 6 for them. Lo and behold, don't look now. Glad we already beat them earlier in the season, but the Arizona Cardinals are 5-4 and atop of the NFC West. They picked behind us at number 4 in this year's NFL draft and took MHJ as the wide receiver from Ohio State. They've been doing some good things since we beat them in week 2. So I'm kind of glad we don't have to play them in the second half of the season. Got them out of the way, got the win, the whole 9 yards. But lo and behold, you see at the bottom of your screen, Carolina's still doing Carolina things. Would not be surprised if they end up. I mean, there's like 8 teams, 7 teams that are 2-7 right now. But Carolina's definitely down there with them. And who knows what's going to happen, right? But one of the last things that we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to be looking at the game coming up on Thursday night. And before we bring our guest in to talk about that game, Terry McLaurin had a really good statement. He said, look, the good thing about this one, we get to learn from the Pittsburgh loss and have a chance to get out and get the taste out of our mouth on Thursday. It doesn't get too much better than going on the road versus a division opponent and having a chance to win. And that's basically all you're trying to do is give yourself a win. Starting lineman Sam Cosme said there's nothing more than that I want to do than beat Philly. So they're going to have a pretty pissed off team on their hands come Thursday night. And I kind of believe that, right? Because as we look at the NFC East currently, look, it's basically a 2-horse race. You have Philadelphia, who now sits at the top at 7-2. Washington's technically second at 7-3. We didn't have our bye week yet, which is why Philadelphia sits number 1. So essentially we're tied, if you want to be honest, but it's splitting hairs, right? And then basically you have 2 teams bringing up the basement. You have Dallas in third at 3-6 and the New York Giants at 2-8. So look, Dallas is falling apart. Not going to be any good the rest of the season. Same thing with New York Giants. We already swept the New York Giants. So we got them out of the way. The problem is we still have 4 games of our remaining schedule left. Both 2 against Dallas, 2 against Philly. So, look, we know what's going to happen. It's going to be a crazy game come Thursday night. And coming Thursday night on Amazon Prime, it's the Commanders versus the Eagles. 8:15 from Lincoln Financial Field. And look, what bigger game is there? Finally, a great game on Thursday night. Not a snoozer. not one that you're going to fall asleep in, one that you're probably going to be staying up late, and you're going to be late for work on Friday morning because you're going to stay up and watch the whole game, right? So with that being said, I'm going to introduce my buddy, Joe Sullivan, to come in. He's part of the Sully Squad. Hey there. Welcome, Mr. Joe.
Hey, what's up, Steve? How you doing, man? First off, dude, thanks for having me on. And I got to tell you, man, as a football fan, it's exciting to see this rivalry back. Now, maybe not so much as an Eagles fan because you guys are good again, but as a football fan, I mean, when I started watching ball, man, it was Eagles, Redskins, it was Buddy Ryan's defense, the Hogs. You guys had the posse like Sanders, Art Monk, Gary Clark. I mean, I just remember watching like straight up wars between these two teams and good memories, good and bad memories. For every body bags game, I remember you guys coming to the stadium and beating us in the playoffs and Buddy Ryan got fired. You know what I mean? So really excited for this rivalry. And again, thanks for having me on and I'm really looking forward to Thursday.
Yeah. You bring up a great point that even though the era is different, it kind of almost brings back those 80s, 90s vibes
right
of the old NFC East rivalry, right? I kind of thought that we were going to get there with Dallas, but Dallas has kind of just gone a different direction this year. But it seems like, look, Philly's putting up good campaigns on an annual basis and going deep into the playoffs. And even though they started out a little rough this season, it seems like they've kind of come back and given us, or at least you guys as Eagles fans, some kind of an identity, right? Is that something that you can kind of allude to, or basically what have you seen from your team as we're basically in the second half of the season?
Okay, so as you alluded to, it started off a little rough. I mean, we started off 2-2. After the Tampa Bay game, it was like, oh boy, because the offense looked terrible. Defense, Tampa Bay moved it up and down the field. Then we had the bye, and then of course the Cleveland game, was a win, but it was kind of ugly. And ever since that Cleveland game, I mean, this defense. The defense is top 6 in the NFL. I think they're top 2 or 3 against the run. And the big thing about us is obviously your rookie, the quarterback, has taken the league by storm. Jaden Daniels. But for on our end, we have 2 rookie corners in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, who have really solidified the secondary. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell is basically playing like a number 1 corner, and Cooper DeJean has played really good in the slot. And I'll tell you another guy that's been a big acquisition. Of course Saquon Barkley, right? That goes with it beyond saying, but Zach Bourne. I mean, what a great job by the Eagles scouts and by Fangio in particular. I mean, this kid was a special teams player and a part-time pass rusher in New Orleans. And, the scouts and Fangio saw something in him. And he's maybe like the 2nd or 3rd highest rated inside linebacker in all football, right behind Fred Warner. So, that basically the story of the Eagles kind of has been the improvement of the defense, to be honest with you.
So sticking with the defense, how has the sophomore campaigns been so far for your 2, I think it was 2 first-round draft pick studs that you guys had last year? It was Carter and the other one.
Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis was, the 2 Georgia kids. Jordan Davis, the jury's out on him. I mean, he doesn't really play all that many. He might play maybe 20-some snaps a game. Not really. I mean, the run defense has been pretty good, so I guess you got to give him some credit for that because he's a big guy. Jalen Carter is the stud. I mean, Jalen Carter gets better every single week. Last week in particular, he had a really good rush on Zach Morton, and I mean, from playing him, Zach Morton's been a hell of a player for all these years.
Yep.
And like Jaden Jalen Carter hit him with like the hand, like little hand move and got right in there. And so he looks like he's going to be the real deal.
So before we switch sides of the ball, what do you see? I don't want to say it's like a weakness, but maybe a weakness or a concern for you from the defensive side of things for Philly this week against Washington.
Well, I mean, the outside pass rush hasn't been that great. I mean, Bryce Huff has been coming on a little bit more. Like he did have a sack fumble last week, but the number one concern with playing you guys is keeping Jaden Daniels staying in the rush lanes and not letting him escape the pocket. I mean, we talked before the season. I mean, I thought you guys were going to improve. I thought the kid was going to be good, but he's exceeded all expectations. I mean, Ron Jaworski was on our radio he was on 94 WIP today, and he made a bold statement. He said that Jaden Daniels is actually the best rookie that he's ever seen in his rookie year. That's how well he's playing.
And I guess the good thing is like he's playing at such a high level to get all this praise, right?
Yeah.
Short of him being injured or having a complete collapse, like he's got to be the odds-on favorite and hands down winner of Rookie of the Year this year.
In
the NFL, right? But when I look at the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't see a lot of regression in you guys from last year, right? Like if anything, you've gotten better. You started off really shaky, which was kind of out of character and surprising to a lot of NFL fans and probably your fan base as well.
Mm-hmm.
And even up until probably a week or two ago, your fan base is yelling every game to have Sirianni canned and bring in the next head coach, but you guys were so powerful on offense last year with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Goddard and and when Hurts focuses and wants to be a good quarterback, he certainly can be, and then holy shit, like you guys go and pick up the best running back in football with Saquon Barkley.
Right.
Why has there been, do you think, a struggle to put that offense, such power guys together and make it work until, let's be honest, like they haven't really started clicking until week 8, week 9, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, so all right, here's the thing. So Jalen, ever since the bye, I mean, Jalen Hurts turned the ball over twice versus Dallas, but before that, he had gone about, I want to say about 4 weeks without turning the ball over because the first part of the year, it was turnovers. And Tony Romo brought up a good point on the game against Dallas. Like, a lot of times the Eagles stop themselves. Like, perfect example, Hurts was hit. I think he was sacked 5 times, hit 6 or 7. And for as well as he's playing, the one thing about Jalen, he holds the ball way too long. At least 4 of those hits were him holding the ball too long. It's not really the offensive line. It's him. Some of his greatest strengths is his greatest weakness. Like he's always trying to make a play. And sometimes that he holds the ball. Next thing you know, he gets a sack fumble. Or like I said, 2 of those drives, the Eagles are moving the ball up and down the field. It's like 2nd and 6. He takes like an 11-yard sack. Next thing you know, it's 3rd and 17, drives over. And that they're drive killers. You know what I mean? Like honestly, that's been, for as much as a Jalen Hurts fan as I am, and the kid is playing well, I hate to say it, but he's actually been kind of the number one culprit of killing these drives by trying to do too much at times.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the good things, at least I, cross my fingers, rub my, rabbit's foot, that Jaden Daniels has been really good at not forcing things so far this season, right? Mm-hmm. Little to no interceptions. So far, knock on wood, no fumbles. Good ball manager, if he's either trying to run with his legs to extend the play, or because of his rib injury the last 2 weeks, you've seen him throw more balls away to not take the sack, right?
Right.
And I think, definitely against your defensive front, that's going to be something he's going to have to do. Now, look, I'm going to be, let's call it as it is. The Eagles defense isn't as stout or as tough as the Steelers or the Ravens, that we faced already this season. But when you talk about that NFC East divisional game, it always brings out more in our opponents, whether it's the Eagles, the Giants. I mean, hell, we make the Giants look like Super Bowl contenders every game, at least until the fourth quarter. So like I think we're gonna get the best out of Philly's defense,
Right.
as well. So I think for us offensively, it's gonna be, can we get the run established and kind of keep the run going? It doesn't have to be 5 yards a clip all the time, but if we can get that 3.5, to make third downs a lot more manageable for JD, I think we'll be fine. You hit it on a nail on the head. It's going to be how much is Philadelphia able to contain Jaden Daniels this week on Thursday night, right? If you guys are really disciplined in your lanes and your outside containment, it might be another game like Pittsburgh. But Jaden's going to be looking to exploit, that simple crack, that simple, over rush on the outside or lack of containment, to use his legs. Is Cliff Kingsbury going to dial anything up, to kind of move him around, or is he going to be like Pittsburgh and kind of keep him in the pocket more? So even though Jaden didn't have a lot of rushing yards, if any, he basically had almost 300 yards passing against the Steelers. So that could be what we see Thursday night against the Eagles. Now, defensively for our team, I think it's really going to come down to, obviously, the elephant in the room is what we do with Saquon Barkley, right? Saquon Barkley is just a unique and prolific running back. Let's call it as it is. Does he get Derrick Henry? No, but he's still just as good, if not like a subpar running back, like right below Derrick Henry. He's just not as tall and as big, but he's just as brutal and nimble. And I mean, he's jumping over guys backwards, right?
Yeah.
So I think if Washington can kind of do the same, and we did it fairly well against Baltimore, and even a little more so, but we need to do it more than what we did against Pittsburgh and Najee Harris. But if we can look, Barkley's going to get his yards Thursday night. There's no doubt about it. But if we can limit the big plays, that's probably one of the biggest keys for us on defense. The second one is going to be our secondary and pass defense, right? I mean, you guys have A.J. Brown, who torched us in both games last season, for personal highs or career highs for him. Devontae Smith, Heisman Trophy winner out of Alabama. Dallas Goedert at tight end, and whoever else you're throwing in at wide receiver. That's probably going to be our biggest mismatch. The only thing that kind of gives me some glimmering, shining of hope is if Marshawn Lattimore is ready to go Thursday night, and I'm not even convinced and warm and fuzzy that he's going to go Thursday night. If he did, then I'd feel a lot more comfortable about this game. But look, it's the first one. My prediction for this season was that we split the series with you guys. Going into Lincoln Financial is always hard for us on the road. However, we did win there last year, so you kind of put that in your hat. But this season is way different, than it was last year. So,
right.
Kind of where do you see this game going on Thursday night?
Yeah, well, so it's going to be a tough one because like I said, it's definitely going to be a challenge. I honestly, like looking at it, objectively, like not through like Eagles green colored glasses or anything, but I think we're just a little bit ahead of you guys as far as like, you have the young quarterback, like the coach has come in. But defensively, I think the Eagles have a huge advantage defensively, especially with the D tackle. Is it Allen's still out, correct?
Yeah, he's out for the season.
Yeah, so that's a big loss. So I think I like the Eagles in this game. I think it's going to be tight, but I see like an Eagles like like a 27-23 or 27-21 type game. But I just, for this particular year, I think the Eagles are a little ahead, but I got to be honest, man, going forward with that kid in the division, you guys are definitely on the come. I think this is going to turn into a hell of a rivalry.
I think it will. And, before I give my prediction for the game, we got a couple comments that, hey, look, Michael Rice jumps in and says, hey, it would be great to see the NFC East be that powerhouse again, just as you alluded to earlier. And I wholeheartedly agree that, look, this was kind of an off year for Dallas. Dak's out for the season with injury, whatever. There's kind of dysfunction. What they call the, I won't say scapegoat coach, but, lame duck coach, McCarthy, who contract wasn't extended, but, typically they're, a 10, 12 win team.
Right.
So other than the New York Giants, who haven't been able to figure out who they are in the last couple seasons, basically the NFC East is kind of going back to that, we have the capability of putting 3 teams annually in the NFC playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting to be that powerhouse again with those rivalries reestablished. I feel with our new, coaching staff and the ownership regime and Adam Peters that we said at the beginning of the discussion, we're going to be able to bring back those old rivalries and great games, that we had between our two teams for so long. Eileen's checking in, says, hi, guys.
Hey, what's up, Eileen?
Hey, what's up, Eileen? Thanks for checking in. And Sean says, what's up, guys? Sprinkle in some Johnny Wilson and Dotson ball out would be nice, but you have to focus on the 3-headed monster of Barkley, AJ, and the Slim Reaper. And, he's absolutely right. It's funny because Washington, at the trade deadline they thought they used the 3rd round pick from Dotson that Philly gave us.
Yeah.
For Dotson, but we ended up using our own because of where they ranked in the picking or whatever. Mm-hmm. But we still have a 3rd round pick, but we used a 3rd round pick to help pick up Lattimore. Basically I got to be honest that I kind of thought, I know he was going to go in as, wide receiver number 3, maybe number 4 for you guys, but I kind of was expecting a little bit more out of Dotson. So far this season for you guys, especially in the 2 games that AJ Brown was down, and out, but there just wasn't anything there for him.
You know what though? I agree with you, but I will say the last 2 weeks they're starting to find him a little bit more. Like the Jacksonville game, he had a couple nice grabs, and then last week against Dallas, he had 1 or 2 catches along the sidelines. And it's funny because Sean brought it up, but it wouldn't shock me if they specifically run a few plays for Dotson against you guys this week.
And let's be honest, Dotson's probably going up in the huddle to Jalen and is like, hey man, give me the ball at least 3 times this game, maybe 4.
Right.
My old team, I just want to try and smoke them once. And Sean chimes in again. He's like, look, Zach Bond has been the highest graded linebacker in the entire NFL each of the past 3 weeks per Pro Football Focus, with a 91.3, a 92.6, and a 90.9, which are all stellar numbers. And like I said, I think it'll be interesting to see how you guys defensively scheme to go against JD. Do you take the approach that Pittsburgh did and try to spy somebody on JD all the time, like Pittsburgh did with Queen, and they were relatively successful at it. Let's be honest. Or do you try to just, put a combination of pressure, blitzes, stunts, coverage, mix-ups, and disguising coverages, against the Commanders?
Yeah, you know what? I think they mix it up because, to Sean's point about how good Zach Bond's been playing, who would be the spy? Because Nakobe Dean's been playing some good football too. So, I really don't want to take one of those guys out of the defense and make them just strictly a spy. You know what I mean? I guess.
Yep.
But it'll go with how the game. I guess maybe you start off mixing it up, and then of course if Daniel sits there and kills us on a couple runs, well then maybe that changes it.
Yep. And actually, it says Philly signed Bond for 1.6. Basically, that's almost like a Pittsburgh steal of Russell Wilson, right? When they only signed him for like 1.3. The biggest steal of the offseason. You gotta love it when teams can pull some impact players for pennies on the dollar against the cap, right? Unfortunately, I mean, good for you, but I guess unfortunate for me. As good as we are, and I think we've already exceeded expectations from my team and my fan base. I'm not getting warm and fuzzy about this game against the Eagles. Now, I could be overly surprised, which has happened already once this season. But unfortunately, I think we're going to lose 2 in a row against Philly this week. I just think the offense, especially Barkley against our defense and your wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae, are going to be too much against our secondary because I'm not – and at this point in time, when we're doing this show, I'm not counting on Lattimore playing. It's up in the air still 50-50 if B-Rob's playing for the running attack. Look, we've had some good fill-in for for the offense so far, and Eckler and McNichols and Rodriguez. Speaking of that, hey, look, Sean asked who has been the X factor for you guys come Thursday night. I think Jalen Carter will ball out for the Eagles on defense. If I had to do X factors, I would say that the X factor for the offense is going to be Jaden. It's kind of I don't want to say the easy way out, but it kind of is, right? How much running is Jaden really going to want to do? Is he going to be able to run? That's why I said, are we going to get Jaden from 2 to 3 weeks ago when, he's extending plays, a couple designed runs, or are we going to get the Jaden that we saw this past Sunday against Pittsburgh, where he's basically 300 yards, 50 to 60% completion, out of the pocket, just playing some good game management football, right? So I think on offense, that's going to be the X factor. I think on defense, it's probably, look, I'd love to say Lattimore's playing, but I don't think he is. It's going to be the secondary. And I think the X factor is probably going to be, Wagner's going to show up. Luvu's going to show up. The defensive line is going to try and do what they're going to do. But I think it's going to be Jeremy Chin again in the secondary, right? Because if Lattimore doesn't play, then St. Juice is going to try and get matched up against A.J. Brown. Well, Joe Witt, defensive coordinator, is going to have to come up with something to help figure out coverages or scheme for AJ and Devontae. You just can't play man 50% of the time.
Right.
Post, right. So I think, Chin is going to be that X factor for us on defense, and probably Jaden on offense. So with that being said, I think, look, unfortunately, I think we're going to take the loss. It puts us to 7-4, which in all honesty, I'm still proud of. We still got, 6 games left, including a bye to get healthy. I just think Philly's offense is going to be too much for us. I'm going to say Philly's going to win 31-24. We're going to score some points. We're going to score, get a couple touchdowns, kick a field goal. But I think Philly's just going to be, that extra touchdown or so ahead of us. I'm going to say 31-24 Philly on Thursday night. It's going to be a great game. It's probably going to come down to the last 2 to 3 minutes. All of our solid games, the Ravens came down to 2 minutes. Pittsburgh came down to 2 minutes. But if we are fortunate enough to get a lead, we just need to be able to keep that lead, unlike giving up a 10-point lead against Pittsburgh. It kind of is what it is.
I was going to say, even last year when you guys sucked, both games were really close. The game up here, honestly, I was thanking my lucky stars that Rivera didn't go for 2, because I think we would have won. And then
the first game of the season, we went to overtime, didn't we?
Exactly.
Yep.
But when you scored that last touchdown, I was like, I thought maybe he would go for 2, and then when he didn't, I was like, man, thank God. And then with the game down there, both of those games, Sam Howell looked like Pat Mahomes against us.
Yeah, and it'll be a good game. I have no doubt about that. And, it's definitely going to be, and I guess the best part is like, we still see you guys again yet this season, coming down to Landover. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, right before Christmas, the 22nd. And
yep.
who scares me? I know Sean asked you about the X factors, but the guy that scares me on your team all the time, he always kills us, a scary Terry McLaurin. McLaurin, it seems like he kills us every game.
Well, hopefully he can have a same production output that he had against the Steelers.
Although then again, he doesn't have Bradbury guarding him this year, because like last year, Bradbury, he was toast against everybody.
Yeah. But you guys have definitely made some improvements back there, and it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. So before I let you go for tonight, I actually asked Joe to jump in and kind of help us do the last segment that we always do. Actually, real quick, I hope I don't mess it up too bad. How do you think Scary Terry will fare against Quinion Mitchell? I say we win 28-20. I think you're probably pretty close on the score, Sean. In that touchdown range. Look, both teams are going to score some points. It's probably going to be 1 touchdown to 10-point difference. I don't. Maybe you guys go ape shit and get 30-40, but I think it's going to be a lot closer, a little tighter. But you're probably not off on the score. Scary Terry, I think, is going to come down to how much you guys are in man versus zone, too deep, too high, shells, whatever your defensive coordinator is going to throw at us, right? Terry's probably going to have a couple catches. They got to try and at least get Terry involved, whether it's short, routes, some play action to try and open up something long, whatever. I don't know if he's going to have a super productive game. I'd like to say he would. I don't know if he's going to go crazy for another 120 yards. That might have been an anomaly. But, it was against the Steelers defense. Now if you guys are trying to go more and stop the running attack between Eckler and McNichols and Rodriguez, then, that very well could open up some Scary Terry effect in Philadelphia. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I got to say that, if you're a betting person, I would at least put Scary Terry on the anytime touchdown scoring. It's funny that I didn't even pull up the line. I know that early this morning it was like 3.5-point favorite for Philly going into the game. I don't know if the line changed much today. But if you're doing a parlay for the game, I would probably take the Eagles on the money line, outright winners. I'd probably take Barkley for the anytime touchdown scoring. Probably take McLaurin for the anytime touchdown scoring. And if you're feeling brave, maybe even throw in a fourth one somewhere in there to give yourself a good 4-leg parlay. But before we call it closed for the night, I asked Joe to kind of help run down the Week 11 slate of NFL games that I always do as the last segment of my show. So him and I together, we might not agree on all the games, but we'll breeze through them pretty quickly. Obviously, we just talked about the Thursday night game between Washington and Philadelphia. We're both picking Philly, as much as that pains me to say. However, next week I definitely will be taking Washington over Dallas, so there's no need to get into that.
And that's something we all can agree on. Both fan bases absolutely despise the Cowboys. So
we do, right? We absolutely do. All right. So the first game, Joe, Green Bay against the Bears.
I'm going Green. I mean, the Bears look really horrible. I'm going Green Bay.
They are. The Packers are doing really well. The Bears are doing pretty bad. In that tough NFC North division where 3 out of 4 are going to probably end up going to the playoffs. You got to go with the Packers. Jacksonville at Detroit.
Yeah, I like Detroit. Jacksonville's boy. I mean, have you ever seen a guy that was supposed to be so great in Trevor Lawrence and people keep telling you, oh, he's good, and you watch him and you're like, this dude's not that good.
Yeah, he's not good. He's not a $55 million quarterback. And oh, by the way, he's probably out for the season. So, yeah.
He's the Ben Simmons of NFL.
He probably is. So, yep, we're both going with the Lions. The Minnesota Vikings at the Tennessee Titans.
I'm gonna go Minnesota, but I feel like they're due for like a loss. Like I'm going Minnesota, but I don't know. Then I'm not. Tennessee really blows, but I could see Minnesota choking this one.
It's interesting that you say that because Minnesota basically almost lost this past weekend.
Right.
I think it was Jacksonville, right? Or somebody.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they didn't
really
even
bad.
score a touchdown.
Right. Does Minnesota figure out things on the road? Does Tennessee sneak away with a win? I mean, I gotta think that Minnesota's gonna win, but I feel like Tennessee might do it a little upset. So I'm gonna pick Tennessee. Las Vegas Raiders at the Dolphins down in Miami.
Miami. The Raiders blow.
Yep. The Raiders just haven't figured out who they are yet. If Ken's watching or watches this show, tomorrow, usually he watches it afterwards. He'll see that, we're both hating on his Raiders, but unfortunately, I think the Dolphins are going to pull this one out. The LA Rams at the Patriots.
I thought the Rams were going on a little bit of run. I kind of like the way New England's play. I'm going New England.
After kind of what I saw yesterday, I would tend to agree with you, right? LA is going to make that cross-country trip east. And, look, the Bears aren't necessarily the greatest team in the world, but the Patriots put a really decent showing against the Bears yesterday, especially the Bears defense. So, I kind of like New England for the upset. Cleveland and at New Orleans.
New Orleans got Derek Carr back. I'm going New Orleans.
They seem to have found something under that little interim coach Rizzi. And like you said, with Derek Carr back in Kamara, let's give it to the Saints. This should be a good one. Kind of a game of toilet bowls between the Colts and the Jets.
The Jets. I mean, is there anybody more? Who's the most? Or they might be the most disappointing team. I'm going Colts. I think the Jets are a dead carcass.
Man, it's tough, right? I'm guessing Joe Flacco is starting again for Indianapolis. Man, I'll tell you what. Some reason the Colts are just giving me warm and fuzzies. Good game in Pittsburgh is going to be Baltimore at Pittsburgh.
You know what? I'm going Pittsburgh. A lot of people. I know Baltimore will be the hot pick because of Lamar Jackson and everything, but Pittsburgh really plays him tough. I think they if any team's ever kind of figured out how to slow Lamar Jackson down, it's Pittsburgh.
I think, my gut tells me Pittsburgh. I just feel that Baltimore's secondary is too suspect to stop Russell Wilson and Pickens and Jefferson and basically what he was doing to us on Sunday. And Baltimore's defense is just as good, if not better, or Steelers' defense is just as good, if not better than Baltimore's.
Yeah.
Baltimore's secondary is just too suspect, even though their front is a lot better. If Baltimore can somehow manage that Jackson Henry combo, it's going to be Pittsburgh all day. Atlanta at Denver.
I like Denver. Denver should have beat Kansas City last week. They're playing some good defense.
They are. I got to go with you on Denver. Atlanta is kind of stumbling a bit, and especially with them going to Denver, I don't see Atlanta being able to knock off Sean Payton and Bo Nix. Seattle at San Francisco, an NFC West rivalry game.
Love the 49ers, especially with McCaffrey back. I think they're ready to go on a little bit of a run.
I'm hoping that whatever the sideline tussle was between Debo and I don't even know who that was, the dude that he was fighting with on his own team. But like you said, with CMC back, you got to think that Purdy's back on track. And you got to go with the 49ers. Probably the game of the week. And I'm kind of surprised it didn't get flexed. I think it was just because of the time logistic notification, but Kansas City at Buffalo.
I love the Bills. I mean, is it, Kansas City finds a way to win every single week, but they are so due for an L. I think Buffalo wins this game.
Even with Coleman out this week for Buffalo, I think that Buffalo still finds a way to knock off Kansas City. Hey, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but I think Kansas City's luck is going to run out on their perfect season.
You know what's funny? I'm getting Eagles 2023 vibes a little bit from Kansas City, except they have a much better defense. So I don't think they're not going to, and they have Pat Mahomes, so they're not going to collapse like the Eagles did last year. But I mean, look at they're every week you're like, damn, how the hell are they winning this game? That's what I thought for us all last year.
Yep. Yeah. Last two games, Cincinnati at the Chargers.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think I like the Chargers, but I don't know. That's a coin flip.
You could definitely see Cincinnati, going west and pulling the upset. But I think, what Jim Harbaugh is doing out there in LA with Herbert and company is pretty good thing right now. And I think I'd have to take the Chargers. And then the Monday night, I'll call it a Monday night snoozer. The Texans at the Cowboys. Battle of the state of Texas.
Gotta love the Texans coming off of 2 losses, and they really should have beat Detroit last week. So they desperately need a win, and Dallas is dead.
Yep, absolutely. They're done for the year. Yeah, I don't know if you can stick a fork in them. They're toast. They're done. They're overcooked cow. So, actually, we got one. I missed one. Sean said the point spread for the Eagles Washington game is still 3.5. Oh, with a total over under at 48.5. So, I was doing 31. Wow, so that's even, man, I'd almost take the under on that. Well, maybe let's see, 24 and 24 is 48. You gotta take the over on that. You gotta think, right? Maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, even if you came out, 24-24, that would put you at the over under.
Yeah, that's a, you know what? I feel like it's going to be right. It's such a, they're so good at setting them lines, because think about it. All of our predictions is right around 48 points pretty much.
Yep. Yeah. Actually they are. So thank you for jumping on tonight, Joe, and tell people where they can find you guys and your show, and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I do a show on Monday nights. It's basically all about Philly sports. It's called the Sully Squad. We're on at 6 p.m. And, obviously this time of year, it's mostly Eagles, but, we're 4 for 4. But we talk all sports. I mean, we don't, we're geared towards Philadelphia, but, we talk about the whole league, because let's keep it real, man. I mean, if you're an Eagles fan, you're also an NFL fan. So I just love football. You know what I mean? So we'll talk all the big games and all the big matchups, and so yeah, and we're right on out of the box sports here. So 6 p.m.
Awesome. Real quick before I let you go, our good buddy Paul jumps in, says, "I'm calling it right now, 8 in a row, Dallas." I'm just saying, here we go. That's 8 losses in a row. He's going tanking for the Colorado players.
I don't blame him. And it's funny, we talked about Ken with the Raiders earlier, and if I'm Ken, I'm hoping for Raiders L's, because if you put a quarterback out there in Vegas, they have a lot. That team actually has a lot of talent in a lot of spots. They just don't have the guy behind the trigger.
You're right. And that's kind of a lot of it, right? Is, who you got at that quarterback position. Let's be honest. If we didn't have Jaden, we'd probably be in the same boat as the Giants. It just kind of is what it is. So
yeah, you don't win shit in this league without a quarterback. I mean, look at the Bears, man. I mean, the Bears haven't had a quarterback in forever, and then they take this kid from USC, Caleb Williams, and everybody says he's the next great thing, and now they need to hire an offensive coach after this year and see if they could resurrect him.
Yep. One last comment before we do some housekeeping stuff. Sean says he's taking the over the 48.5. Anytime touchdowns by Barkley, Hurts, and Dotson. Dotson will probably be the wild card there. I could see
say
that.
that'll pay pretty good if you pick him.
It probably would. The worst part is, when you pick quarterbacks to do anytime touchdowns, like it has to be rushing, which kind of makes it sometimes a little bit more difficult, but it kind of is what it is. So before we call it a night, a couple housekeeping things for our listeners here at Out of the Box Sports. Ken Fry will be doing the Bat Cave tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. You can find him there. Coming up later tonight after this show, Commander's Gridiron, is the Part-Time Marks, which is your wrestling show for WWE and NXT. Those guys come on at 10:30 tonight here at Out of the Box Sports. So just log back in and onto one of our platforms to find those guys. You can find me as a special guest tomorrow night on the Philly Press Box with my buddies Bill Furman and Chet at 7 p.m. on their show and their network, and the Philly Press Box at 7. I'll be guest appearing to talk about the upcoming Thursday night game between Washington and Philadelphia. And our next show here at Commander's Gridiron will be next Tuesday, November 19th at 8:30 p.m. Just same time, same channel. As always, thank you for tuning in. I want to give Joe a thank you for jumping on tonight and talking some football. Sorry we went a little late, but it's always good to catch up with you, buddy, and talk some NFC East football between the Commanders and the Eagles.
Yeah, it was a great time, man. I like I said, I appreciate you having me on, and as a football fan, I think it's great that you guys are back. But as an Eagles fan, I'm like, damn, this is going to be hard. You know what I mean? It was kind of, I was going to admit, it was kind of nice being able to go down to like FedEx Field and like, with when you didn't have a quarterback and all. Now you got a legit guy, and it's like, shit, we might wind up losing these games. You know what I mean?
These games won't be easy ones anymore, right?
No, but all kidding aside, though, the NFL. I feel like the NFL is better when Washington is a sleeping football market. I mean, you remember, just like I do, back when Washington was like one of the epicenters in the National Football League. I mean, RFK Stadium sold out every week. You had Gibbs, the place was rocking, and it's it just as a pure football fan, I think it's the NFL is better when it's like that.
Yep, certainly is. So for those of you listening and tuning in, thank you for tuning in. Tell a friend, be a friend, give us a like, follow, subscribe to Commander's Gridiron, as well as Out of the Box Sports, and also the Sully Squad. On Monday nights, you can catch Joe and his buddies over there talking everything Philly on all sports. Until next time, have a good night.